3 reasons why I should be your girlfriend. Number 1, I cook and I clean. Number 2, I'm super duper loyal. And number 3, I'll always make sure that all of your needs are met. So let me know whether I make the cut.
If you're a man who wants a relationship, not a hookup, and you see a woman like this, run. Not because you don't want someone who'll cook and clean. Of course you do, and if your partner does that, I hope you appreciate her for it. But what is she doing in this video? She's using her sexuality to seduce you. This sexual hint is seduction, and I'll explain in a moment what the problem with seduction is. It's seduction because she treats sex between a man and a woman in a relationship as a purely physical act. In other words, she's appealing to your lower impulses in a way similar to how malevolent people lure small children with candy. Of course, there's a physical component to sex, and it's important that your needs and hers are met, but the way she presents it, there is no real difference whether that need is fulfilled with her or with anyone else, meaning the sex isn't transmuted into a connection that goes deeper than the physical dimension. Some people call it soul connection, some call it even a connection with God. If you're a complete materialist, maybe you won't relate to this concept. I didn't relate to them for most of my life either, but what made me understand that sex has a layer beyond the physical was precisely when I had sex that was purely physical, and I felt terrible afterward. I felt like I had objectivated both myself and the woman. So whether you're a materialist or not, you don't want to experience sex as a purely physical encounter because it's an unpleasant experience, both when you're treated purely as a body and when you treat someone else that way. I've taken this to an extreme, and obviously not every hookup feels that way, but that only reinforces my argument that sex has an additional layer, and that within a loving relationship you can maximize that layer and receive the full experience of connection, one that is both physical and more than physical. That's why I say you should be wary of women who try to seduce you with sex. Notice that all the villainesses in movies do exactly this. They use their sexuality to try to seduce the hero, whether it's in James Bond, whether it's Basic Instinct, whether it's the goddess Kirke from the Greek mythology, who, by the way, after seducing the men, turned them into pigs, meaning into animals, and lowly animals at that, because that's what we become when we operate solely on our physical impulses. If we don't control our nature, it controls us. A person can choose whether he's part of nature or above nature, but there's no middle ground. And if you see yourself as part of nature, meaning part of the living world, like wolves and lions, you'll feel that something of your humanity is being lost. The Jungle Book is a story that illustrates exactly this point, that a human being cannot be part of nature. He also has culture, and therefore he leaves nature to civilization, which is separate from nature. Civilization uses nature, but every culture by definition separates itself from nature, and there is no human being without culture. Therefore, if a woman tries to seduce you through her sexuality, it probably means she doesn't believe her sexuality has more value than just the physical. That's why women who have experienced sexual abuse, especially at a young age, tend to see themselves as purely sexual objects and their sexuality as meant to serve another person, because that's what they learned gives them validation from the adult, especially if that adult was someone close to them, meaning a figure who was supposed to provide security and protection. So if you want a relationship, choose someone who respects her own sexuality and who isn't herself tempted to use it as a way to attract men, because it will work for her, but it will work with specific men, the ones who are looking for exactly that, and it will only cause her to repeatedly reenact the experience that all she has to offer is her sexuality. Someone who is looking for a relationship, as beautiful and sexual as she may be, will not put her sexuality front and center, not because there's a problem with sexuality, but because sexuality is such a powerful force that any wise woman understands. If she wants to create a deeper connection with the man, it wouldn't be wise for her to showcase her sexuality to the same degree as all her other qualities, because sexuality will naturally capture more attention, and that will simply attract predatory men into her life, men who may appear interested in her, but what drew them in the first place was the most prominent thing about her, which was her sexuality. And once they get that, they'll stop showing interest in her. That's why you want to avoid women who appeal to your lower impulses by putting their sexuality front and center. It won't lead you to a good relationship. Thank you for watching.